Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Thanks very much for joining us. My name is Ian Stewart. I'm the Product Marketing Director at Exasol. And today's webinar, we're actually talking around moving from slow SQL to scalable speed and all about a real data evolution. Quick word maybe on the format. The focus really today, this is not about being a product webinar. It's trying to bring to life a conversation really between people who've lived through a real data platform evolution together. The challenges that forced the change, the decisions they made, and what they'd do differently if they were starting again today. And it really the question that we're trying to build on as we go through the time together is, what would experienced teams change if they were starting their data platform journey today? So keep that in mind. Think about it as we go through. As ever, as you go through, if there's questions come to mind, please drop them in the chat, and we can, if we have time, we can maybe take some of them at the end, but more likely we will come back to you afterwards and provide information. So without further ado, I wanted to introduce today's panel, just to introduce the people here. So from AIGS Insights, we've got Michaela Naidu, who's business intelligence developer. We've got Gustav Pieter, who's Sales and Marketing Director at AIGS. And from Digital Planets, we've got Dom Albrecht, who's Head of Data Analytics. So I'd like to maybe just, team, give you maybe 30 seconds each just to introduce yourselves, maybe give a little bit of context as to how you find yourself in this project. So Michaela, let's start with you.
Cool, thank you, Ian. Hi, everyone. I am Michaela Naidu. I'm a BI developer and a project team lead at AIGS Insights. We work closely with Dom and Digital Planet to help manage and maintain the ETL process.
Right, and Dom.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Yeah, my name's Dominic Albrecht. I look after data and analytics at Digital Planets. We are an e-commerce fulfillment provider to some of the larger brands in the country. And I'm here to hopefully tell you a little bit about the warts and all story and how we went through our change from our old lives into our new enlightened lives with Exasol.
Excellent. And Gustav, from yourself.
Ian, thanks for the intro. Yes, I'm Gustav, I'm Marketing and Sales Director for AIGS Insights. My role is to sell our products with the distributors for both Exasol, resellers for Exasol, distributors for Yellowfin, and OpenEdge Progress in the country, in Sub-Saharan Africa. So in our role, we appoint partners, we resell, we implement, and we support. So I'm the guy that sold Dom what he's using today, and he's not angry at me, so I'm happy to be on this panel.
It's a winner. Excellent. Great. Thanks all. Well, Gustav, I'd like to start with you, maybe in the first instance, if I can here. Maybe just to set the scene a little bit, what was happening in the business that told you that the old SQL-based approach wasn't going to hold? You know, what was the driving force for this change?
Yeah, Ian, so as I mentioned, being the distributor for Yellowfin, it's a BI tool. In many cases, we connect directly to the enterprise databases, the transactional databases. Now, knowing that those aren't typically optimized for reporting purposes, you expect some performance challenges. We then quickly learned that we had to move into data warehouses. And as those matured, we had a bunch of SQL-based data warehouses. And there was just a few things that sort of came undone. You know, it was the designing of the databases, the star schemas, the infrastructure, indexes, maintaining it, building it, all of those challenges that sort of, you know, become real when you run complex and bigger queries. And we were looking for something else. And then we found the Holy Grail, columnar databases. It wasn't brand new, but we weren't really exposed to it. And we did a bunch of benchmarks. And I'm not going to steal Dom's thunder, but in that same process, Dom was in the same process of I have to fix some of my performance constraints. And we looked at the vendors and just really found Exasol. And I think later on we'll share some of the stats, but we found it to be very easy to deploy. We found it was you could actually know what the cost was going to be when you consume it. We were able to do on-prem. In the early days, being in Africa, on-prem was really, you know, the best option. You couldn't always do cloud infrastructure, and internet wasn't great. It's much better today, but still, we needed to make sure we can run on-prem. And I mean, nowadays there's other reasons to be on-prem, but the reasons are still there. You want to be on-prem.
Yeah.
So easy management, known cost, and then just running the product and it works is what made us choose Exasol as initially just to partner with, and then later become the reseller. So we loved it so much we became the reseller. We scaled up, and today we represent them in country. And every BI deployment, it's a recommendation. We don't see products deployed without that going forward.
Excellent, that's good. And Michaela, let's jump to you if we can for a minute. You must have been hands-on with the data every day. What did that pain at that stage look like from where you were sat and involved with this?
A lot of it came from, like Gustav mentioned, the performance, the slowness of the queries. And I think in turn that does affect business decisions. So having Exasol be, like Gustav said, the holy grail, having that performance on a database allows your front end users of whatever BI tool or any business decisions that need to be made can be made quicker.
Excellent, good. And Dom, from your perspective, when you first perhaps looked at this from the outside, did what you initially see match what's just been described, or was there more from it from your perspective in this?
Yeah, I think Ian, the Gustav and Michaela really sort of touched on the essence of where it all boiled down to. I think the progression or the story in terms of how we got to this was we'd been through a couple of different iterations of SQL based data warehouses in the lead up to our decision. And that's not to say anything negatively against SQL in any way, shape, or form. I think the shift between sort of a transactional environment and a reporting environment is one that you never want to cross-contaminate. And we had managed to build some kind of separation in between the two of them. But the truth of the matter is that operational data and reporting data are not intended to serve the same purpose. And we needed to make a transition because we had simply reached a critical mass in terms of volume of data that we were processing on a short-term basis, on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, that required a not just a shift, but a pretty much 180-degree turn from where we were. I don't want to say 360-degree turn because that's not going to get us anywhere, but a 180-degree turn from where we were. And we went through and we did sort of fairly extensive of research at the time into what the other solutions were that were available in the market. And I won't name any names, but there's a certain winter-themed provider that was kind of banging on my door quite vociferously at the time, and there wasn't a great deal to choose between the two of them in terms of performance at the time, and I think that's often where the marketing and the sales machine kicks into gear, and sort of the persuasion takes you down a path which might not necessarily always yield the best long-term results.
Yeah.
So,
sorry,
go for it. Go for it.
I was going to say, I was just interested in terms of maybe it's a question to all three of you. Where within the mix of the challenges, where would you say the pain was felt first, on the technical or the business side of the challenge?
Yeah, I can answer that as 100% on the business side. Yeah. We were in our old environment. We were running at a point where out of every hour we were losing between 30 and 45 minutes to ETL loads, which means that at best case we had a half an hour, and at worst case we had 15 minutes, and possibly even less, where reporting and data was made available. not just to our business users internally for a start, but ultimately to our customers as well, who are direct consumers of that data. It wasn't sustainable. It placed an inordinate amount of pressure on my team, because there was just so little time between every run in order to produce data. It didn't support the self-service environment that we wanted to create. It was just a simple bottleneck, and that manifested itself into more and more compounding requirements and more requests for data, which really didn't support where we wanted to take our data environment.
Yeah, cool. Okay.
Yeah, I can maybe add to Dom's comments there. Yes, business, and he mentioned the other holy grail of BI is self-service. Now, the challenge with self-service is you let the end user decide what he wants to see and how he wants to filter and slice and dice. But if you have a complex query behind the scene, that is a very complex SQL query, and it's querying 2 million rows, you are destined for failure. So one of the, let's say, unintended consequences of NLQ, that was great. Now we can let the guy ask a question in English, the system will generate the SQL. You don't have any way of managing what that SQL is going to look like. You don't know what the question is going to look like. So what does the data structure need to look like? And there you run into huge constraints. You open up self-service, the guy does a silly thing, the user, and the query runs for 20 minutes. This is
and
where
everybody else is negatively affected at the same time.
Yes, and where we really found value was the fact that within the Exasol infrastructure, and I'm not a technical guy, but for me, it's like I can dump anything as a flat Excel, almost. It's a flat table, it's in there, and then Exasol's clever enough to join what it needs to join based on the query that's coming in. And guess what? It's learning in the process. And the second time that I'm asking the question, it's even faster. So it was fast the first time around, second time, it's way faster. So it's like that self-learning, the ability to let the database decide what's best. It took a lot of effort and constraint out of our team and Dom's team to decide what the structure looks like, where do we index, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, excellent. So I was keen to explore a little bit more now, just in terms of that move to Exasol, the migration, and some of the challenges. Maybe, Michaela, if we could pivot to you. I mean, from your experience on this, what was it like working with Exasol as a platform in that migration stage of moving the program over?
Yeah, Ian, I think simplicity was the key thing. An example that I can think of at the top of my head is a basic merge statement within Exasol. I think having a 3-in-1, almost like a Swiss Army knife for your data, having a simple command line like that to insert, update, and delete makes maintenance of your ETL process much easier. Besides simplicity, it's also things like conversions of data types. It's fairly simple, especially because Exasol and Python work very well together.
Excellent.
Ian, I want to, as the non-techie, add something technical, but what I also realized, reading about all these TLAs, the three-letter acronyms, everybody ETLs everything, and then, what is ETL? Extract, transform, load. And then I asked the guys, what's slow? Well, the transform is slow. And the difference in approach, the first thing that Dirk from your team, the technical team at Exasol said in his German accent, I'm not going to try and mimic it, but never do ETL, do ELT. So bring in the data as flat and as easy as possible into the Exasol database, and then do the transformation. And on that, I think, Dom, that's where we would have seen your 40 minutes ETL process drop to 1.5, 2 minutes. It was just amazingly different.
Yeah.
I want to add to that, if I could, Ian. I think the thing that makes Exasol so convenient is the predictability of it. There's other providers out there And I know that it's a real theme at the moment in many of the environments where people are trying to migrate away from cloud environments because costs have skyrocketed and become so unmanageable in so many different facets. I think the thing that really stands out to me from an Exasol point of view is I'm not paying per query. I can query and I can ETL and I can ELT and I can LTL, whatever, however many acronyms, whichever way around you want to spin them. And no, I'm not going to do a German accent either, is the thing that I like the most. I can't, in good conscience, in an environment like ours in South Africa, where we are already pressed by exchange rates and fluctuations like that, deal with variable cost on a data set. If we're going to make data available and we're going to drive towards self-service, there's absolutely no way that we were going to want to say to people, well, you can't run this query because that's going to cost too much money and it's going to compound with the exchange rate. So we're getting all of the performance and a lot more of the performance at a stable, predictable price, which as a responsible budget holder within a business, I think is a really important facet that really can't be negated in a conversation like this.
And maybe just sticking with that, Dom, in terms of again, with this migration process, obviously the results have been really positive, and it's fantastic to hear you all speaking so highly of the product. But what was there any things that stand out that when you started getting into this that you thought would be hard that wasn't, or things that you thought would be easy but turned out to be harder? Was there any sort of surprises in amongst that?
So yeah, I mean, I think as with everything, there's an adoption and there's a behavior change that you need to go through. And yes, there was a little bit of a transition that we needed to make in how we sort of approach things, how we structured things, how we thought about things. But none of them were insurmountable. Yes, Exasol works on a slightly different SQL dialect than the one that we were used to. And for the first couple of days or weeks, that was a challenge. Now, I have to preface all of this. This was in the days before ChatGPT and Claude, and there wasn't the sort of the familiarity of Exasol in the market. So in those days, there was a lot less information available than there is now. I can 100% vouch for the fact that if we had to do that again now, that would become an even smaller constraint or an even smaller limitation on us. I think the real thing that it opened up for us and the real change that we needed to make was how we positioned the data within the business. We talked a little bit earlier about the idea of self-service, and the data is only as valuable as the people who can make decisions on it and the people who can use it. In the past, we were the constraint as the data team. We limited the amount of data. We limited the amount of reports. That was a real shift that we needed to make. We needed to come to terms with the fact that self-service means that you open it up. You focus on the structure, you focus on the underlying aspects of it all, and you make sure that that's correct. But actually, how people use the data and how often they want to look at the data and when they want to look at the data, where they want to look at the data, actually, that's the thing that you need to let go of. That's how you create a real environment. And that's where Exasol really, really shone for us, is the fact that we could move from an environment where we had 2 or 3 people creating reports, surfacing reports, displaying reports, where we could open it up to 50, 100 people on the same data set, and everybody could work all at the same time. There was absolutely no problem. We could we could remove the human nature of the problem that we had created. We were the bottleneck, and we had to make that transition into opening that up and really releasing that out into the wild.
Tom, I remember you earlier said it's warts and all. One of the warts we had to deal with was going camel case table names to uppercase table names in those early days. I mean, those were lessons learned. I know it's now just a tick box in the database view. It's taken away, but those are the small things that bite you if you're not aware of it, you know. So as with any project, proper testing, proper productionizing, you know, take all of that into account, and then you minimize those risks.
Yeah, it's a completely valid point, Gustav. This shows you how it's become a non-event in my life, because I don't even think about things like that anymore, and it just kind of transitions into how you go about things, because the upside is just so much more valuable than having to deal with or having to worry about little things like that.
No, that's good insight. So I just wanted, before I move to the next section, which is going to be, you know, how you've built on from this. Gustav, before you had some slides, or a slide that you thought you might want to share. It might now be a good time just to pop some of that up on the screen and discuss that.
Yes, let me open up my screen. I'm going to share. It'll be that screen there. And what I'll do is I'll just talk you through this. Dom, you might recognize some of this. When we did initial testing with Dominique, you mentioned, you know, that out of every hour, half an hour was lost to ETL. Now, this was just initial high-level testing. What I've not done here, it was more or less on the same hardware, more or less on the same ecosystem. The one on the side, the masked one, the winter one, that obviously was based on consumption and calculation and storage, which was a variable. Nobody knew what it was going to cost. This was based on Exasol, based on a fixed data extent. And even in that, you could have a single tenant, multi-tenant. This was done on a single tenant. So it's the worst possible use case or possible test case for the use to test this. And we looked at initial loads of a 200 gig data set, you know, quite a bit of time there, down to 45 minutes. That was initial loads. Then delta loads from half an hour down to 5 minutes. And I think more significantly, these are long-running reports that was used as benchmarks. And we had some of these running for 4 minutes down to 2 seconds. Now, this was 2 seconds as an initial run. What we didn't put in here, I think it's down lower. The moment that Exasol learns and learns your behavior, it will warm up. What I mean by that is, if this is run every morning at 6 o'clock, it knows eventually it's going to be run, and it warms up. And then that becomes way faster still. And again, it depends on how much RAM you've allocated, but those were initial runs. So 4 minutes down to 2 seconds, 3 minutes, 7 seconds, 18 minutes down to 29 seconds. And this was purely because of it's not even a big data set. It was just a very complex query that is being executed with the extraction. This was quite a detailed breakdown. Dom, I think, was it you or Anton that did this? You wanted to know what the initial execution time and the fetching time from the database was for these queries, and then compare that to the others. And you can see, I mean, tenfold is not a number that would be wrong if you were to reference this. Yeah. These were just some of the reports that was run. This was, and maybe to the easy migration in the yellow, Dom's running Yellowfin or at that deployment, and we took the views that was connecting to a SQL database. We literally pointed those views to the Exasol database, and we ran them. This was after we did the uppercase, lowercase fixing, but in essence, it was exactly the same structure. No optimization was done, and a report running on a SQL database, you know, that's where the times came from. This is the actual use case within the Yellowfin platform, literally run next to each other. There's some more. That's the 188 one, down to 7 seconds. And lastly, this one, which was, 10,000 or 1,000 seconds down to 29 seconds. So this was the real use case, you know, and that's the stats that I wanted to share there.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's thanks for sharing that. So look, I guess it makes the next question. Yeah.
I'll just make a point on that super quickly, if I could. I think the reality of when you're creating a self-service environment is the user perception of what you're presenting to them is super important, both from a buy-in point of view at their initial sort of setting of expectations, but also in terms of ongoing use. People are very used to the idea of typing a query into Google and getting an answer in nanoseconds. That's their frame of reference. That's what they're used to. That's what they expect. They're not keen on the idea of, well, all I'm doing is running my report. Why should this be any different to a Google query? When you're taking something from 29 seconds, you're removing a whole bunch of frustration from people's lives. And yes, 29 seconds in the greater scheme of things is not a hell of a lot of time, but what it does is it just becomes a little bit of an enabler. You start building up allies within the business, and you start building up word of mouth that becomes really, really important, that instead of people going, well, I'm just going to ask the analytics team, or I'm just going to go and talk to the reporting people. Well, actually, I can do it myself because it doesn't take long and it's easy to do. And I know that I'm going to get a result. And almost the friction of going to deal with a grumpy developer type, and yes, that's me. I'll hold my hand up on that one very easily. The friction of dealing with a human being and just doing it yourself becomes so valuable in that adoption cycle that you go through when you're dealing with this.
Yeah, no, that's good insight. So, I guess, really good news story in terms of that project. It clearly solved a real problem that was both business and technical. It begs the question of, you've solved that, why keep going with it? Because I know, speaking to you all, there's been a lot of work on all of this and continues since then. So, maybe, Michaela, let's just jump to you. In terms of from when you've, success with this initial project, what did you see perhaps that, following the project, that changed most in your day-to-day workflow in terms of utilizing this, and any sort of insights there?
Yeah, so in maintenance is a huge thing. I believe in other databases, maintaining a simple thing like an index. It's time consuming, having to find the relevant fields, create the index, whether it's an indexed or a materialized view, for example. I think it draws away from time spent on maintenance, and you can focus elsewhere. So because Exasol does create its indexes automatically based on the use of the queries that are being run, that was a huge win.
Okay, and Gustav, from yourself, what maybe slightly different perspective. That immediate fire was put out. Why keep investigating further, and why not just call it a day?
Perfect. Yeah, I'm the sales guy. So what I'm faced with is, if I bring in this new technology stack, what's the effort going to be? What's the skill sets going to be? What do we as a company need to put in place? And the easy answer is not a lot. If I think about our normal constraints, people will have certain technology sets in place, whether that is Fabric as an ETL tool, or Talent, or Python. Where does the compatibility stop? And I'm yet, touch wood, still to find where we could not put Exasol right there, literally within a day, showcase how easy it is to consume. Just point your current ETL process, your current frameworks, put it into Exasol, and it's easy to do. So as the sales guy, that am I going to run into a compatibility because maybe this is an Azure, Microsoft person, they've done everything in Microsoft, can we bring in something else, or do we need to go stick to the Microsoft stack? The compatibility up to now has been easy to do, easy to implement. There's in the Git Exasol sample sets, I believe this is publicly accessible. There are migration templates to take you from an Oracle, a SQL, a Postgres, directly into Exasol, and it takes the team, and I'm going to be bold, I'm going to say, if you have a terabyte of data, within a day we can migrate that database into an Exasol with all the underlying structures, data, all of it, because those predefined code sets are available for you to use. You need to maybe tweak here and there a bit, but it's easy to migrate. So compatibility, current code base and sample sets that's available, and then complement to the Exasol support team. We've not often had to fall back to them. As we also get mature, Michaela and the team have all done the online education. They've all certified Exasol individuals, and that's available. I hope it's still free. It always used to be free. I believe it still is. It's online. So it makes that sales message easier. Train up your people. It is familiar. It is SQL based. There might be some nuances. And I think one of the bigger concepts that was new for me to understand is executing code in the database. Remember my ETL versus ELT. If you have the data in the database, then you are executing that code inside the database. And whether that's Lua, which is its own language, or Python or something else, it all can get done in a familiar language, familiar ecosystem with tool sets that works already.
Yeah, great. And Don, maybe a word from you in terms of the what the architecture looks like, sort of moving on from that today. How does Python and Exasol sit together in production today? Some of the challenges, of when things are maybe not going well. How does that all work as a mix?
When things are not going well in Exasol, I don't know. We haven't come across too many of those type of instances. But if I could just sort of elaborate on the points earlier, we started with an initial use case, and our objective out of our initial use case, we've touched on it, was really to create a self-service environment. But as with the nature of business and human beings, there's always a want for more. So I think one of the real positives in our journey with Exasol is just how much we've been able to incorporate into our initial or enhance our initial intent and design. Michaela's very humbly standing there talking about what she's been through in the years that we've run our Exasol instance, but we've brought in other data sources, we've brought in other data structures, we've brought in other environments into our Exasol instance, and none of them have proved to be insurmountable. As with everything, there's a little bit of something new, and there's a little bit of a learning curve that we all have to go through, and there's a little bit of adoption and evolution that needs to happen. But there is nothing that we have come across that we have not been able to solve. We've brought in, like I said, one additional data source. I've spent the last probably week or so bringing in an additional data source, and I'm very optimistic and positive by just how quickly and easily it happened. I think what this means for us moving forward is, I think one of the real beauties of Exasol is just how AI ready it makes data. We have a couple of use cases that I'm working on with Dirk around how we can leverage the data that we have and turn it into a predictive and hopefully even a proactive type environment moving forward. There's still a ton of work that we need to do, but it's not a matter of us being constrained by technology. The environment, the platform, everything else fits. The thing that we are really not struggling, but the thing that we are spending the vast majority of time on is figuring out how we can use or how we can create the business case for this, how we can commercialize this, how we can turn this into something valuable. And this is something that 3, 4, 5 years ago would have been a very, very, very different kettle of fish. You know, where we did the migration onto Exasol version 8 last year, which in itself was, it wasn't the easiest of all processes, but it was definitely something that we managed to get right. Michaela managed to get right, and we're now in the place where things like AI, or things like predictive, things like the future of where we can take this becomes a hell of a lot easier to do because of the foundations that we laid in the past.
And maybe, I mean, you know, the AI question obviously is topical for everybody. I mean, you know, maybe it's just stick on that theme for a moment. You know, in terms of the, you know, what you've successfully achieved, what you feel that Exasol with work you've done has opened up. You know, do you have a view of what Exasol has helped enable from that AI piece, either in terms of delivery or the investigation more? I mean, maybe, I mean, Dom, let's stick with you initially, but.
Yeah. You know, we've got a really interesting use case which leverages around the idea of process mining. Process mining is really built on the idea of having a solid, repeatable process, which is what we have done for the better part of 13 years. We have anything up to 90 different data points in our process, which we record, which we timestamp, and we have millions and millions and millions of lines worth of data and rows worth of data that we can use out of this. It's an incredibly valuable data set, but only if we can actually turn it into something proactive. Now, I think we all know that AI needs a hell of a lot of data to consume, and it needs to be able to process that readily and quickly, and without that data set, without a solid foundation like we have in Exasol, we wouldn't even be able to be considering something like that. We would need to be planning a budget that possibly stretched as far as the current FIFA World Cup, but I don't think any of us have that kind of money. But yet, with what we have with Exasol, which is a very maintainable, realistic tech infrastructure, which really, like Michaela mentioned, doesn't require a lot of maintenance, doesn't require a lot of effort, doesn't consume a lot of budget. The idea of turning something AI related and running that on that data set is very, very easily and very feasible and very realistic. So much so that a small business like ours is really, really considering it, because I'm not considering it, we're chasing it quite hard actually, because it's we don't need to get into the realms of GDP, the American GDP, or whatever however you want to contextualize that budget. It's easy, it's accessible, it's right there for the taking for us.
Yeah, and I mean, Michaela, maybe from your perspective again, just sticking with this AI theme. I mean, what have you seen in terms of Exasol and the learnings and development? What have you seen that opening up for you in terms of how you are approaching the development work and BI work?
So in terms of development, it was really simple to configure. The way that I was playing around with it was using Claude Desktop and the MCP, in the MCP context of it. But in terms of actual development, I haven't dabbled too much into that yet. But analysis is where the strength really is. And again, I think we all iterate that it's speed. A lot of, for example, I've also been playing around with local LLMs, and it's super slow. You tend to lose interest in even re-asking a question. I've noticed with Exasol, it's efficient. It gives you relevant analysis, and as a developer, it makes creating reports easier for business users.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that. She's being modest. We've been playing with AI on Exasol now, the last week specifically. Some of the warts, yeah, we are learning that case sensitivity in the data now can be a challenge again, but we'll get around it. But as she said, connecting via MCP, because AI means different things to different people. For the technical user, it's about connectivity and MCP and optimizing the queries. For the business user, it's about using a large language model to ask a question. And if we think about again, in our context, with Yellowfin as a layer on top of that, in the past we had NLQ, but it was a governed NLQ within the structure of the view because it was narrating whatever was in the view available. The moment that you enable the AI tick box, it's getting it to Claude or to GPT and say, what do you want? It's open. And then it gives the sample set or the request back to Yellowfin. Yellowfin creates the query and runs it against an unstructured database. And this is where performance comes in, because if you don't allow for that quick performance, the AI becomes useless because you're not getting responses out of it. So again, as easy as it is to connect to it, as easy as it is to run those queries to it. And I'm not sure publicly how available this is, but I know there are now query language in the database coming up soon, context-aware queries in the Exasol database. So it's almost, there's a bit of an overlap between the traditional BI realm, the AL realm, and the data realm, because you can RAG your data, you can query the data, and you can present it. Do we want to visualize it? The world is changing significantly, but as a sales guy, I am glad to see where the time and effort's going. It's nice to see where the enhancements are coming out and at the pace it is. So it's always a challenge as a sales guy. It's difficult to sell old stuff. People want the shiny object and they want to get it production ready. And those two aren't always in the same realm. A lot of things can look good, but it's not productionable, and you need to productionize it. It becomes technical and difficult.
No, I mean, that's good to hear. We feel very passionate about Exasol, having a very firm place in the market in terms of this foundational layer for AI to enable this AI capability. Exactly, you've done a great job of exactly some of the enablers that we feel passionate about. So I mean, I'm just conscious of the time. So the last sort of 10 minutes, 10, 12 minutes or so of this, but maybe Dom, if I switch back to you in terms of lessons learned. If you were starting this again tomorrow, what would you, I guess, what have you learned, good and bad? What would you do differently?
I would definitely start sooner. That's for damn sure. I think the idea of adapting and evolving and accepting the fact that technology is no longer the thing that should be the constraint. I think the idea of doing things differently. I think there's probably one or two small things that we would have liked to change, but on the whole, I think the only thing that I would have done differently is really done it sooner, is acted faster, is really invested more time in trying to get more into Exasol, to get more out of Exasol. Obviously, the one leads to the other. But I don't think fundamentally there is anything that we would have really changed in the approach. I think, we've all talked quite a lot about how Exasol has enabled speed. I think the last couple of months has really highlighted for me how much we've got out of Exasol over the last couple of years, and really how much time I don't want to say wasted, because I don't think it's a waste. We've spent a long time learning. I think if I could have changed anything, I would have probably spent more time on the iteration, on the evolution, on doing more with what we've got. It's a real driver and a real focus for me at the moment personally. And if there's one thing that I would have done differently, it's I would have done this exercise that I'm doing at the moment and trying to incorporate more into Exasol and get more out of Exasol. If I could have done this 3-4 years ago, I I would love to see where we would be right now, because I think the value is there. It's definitely visible for our business, and it's only becoming more and more visible for the business the more we get out of Exasol. So, yeah, no regrets, absolutely none. We would just want to be able to replicate ourselves and do more of the good work that we have done.
Yeah, excellent. Good to hear. And Michaela, over to you on that. Does that echo, sort of your experience? What would you, lessons learned? What would you do differently? What's worked well?
Yeah, so in the data pipeline, I think that answering the business question within your data, instead of just taking your data as is and loading it into a data warehouse or Exasol, you'd want to have the business question in mind, because what you're going to end up with is just it's the same garbage in, garbage out. So just having in the back of your mind, what does my end user want? And that will simplify the ETL process with Exasol, and in terms of speed as well, because you won't have any, call it, unnecessary data within your tables or your database. So yeah, that was one of the things.
Excellent, thank you. And Gustav, yourself, same question.
Thanks, Ian. We recently dealt with a European company, and they have 70 terabyte plus data in their data warehouse on Exasol, and that's the biggest that I've ever dealt with. So at this point, the thinking was, we know Exasol, and nothing's too big for Exasol. But the flip side, within that engagement, they actually showed us that they have way smaller data sets broken up into different structures, even different deployments, and nothing's too small. They have a scenario where they have less than 200 gig of data, but extremely complex and iterative processes that run against it. I thought of your process mining, Dom. I thought it might be relevant in their case, but they've got these iterative processes that in a plain SQL environment just does not work. And they've deployed Exasol with less than 200 gigs of data, and they're getting value out of it. So nothing's too big, but also nothing's too small. And in the past, I might have, and maybe I did or didn't, I can't remember, but didn't recommend Exasol, thinking there's not enough data. And that's not my mindset anymore. It is literally, it doesn't matter how big or small it is, start with that. It's the engine that makes it work, that just makes it easy.
Yeah, I think, again, that's something we feel passionate about, is just that, one of the things that Exasol is able to do is to enable that experimentation on large, complex or small, complex data sets, and explore the art of the possible. So last couple of questions, whilst we've got a bit of time here, is, what mistakes you've made that you tell people not to bother making themselves? Anything that comes to mind? I mean, maybe Dom, start with you again, but anything that you, through this process, that you made a mistake, would flag it as don't waste your time.
Yeah, I've got a couple, and interestingly, there was a conversation that I had with one of Gustav's other partners a couple of months ago, and it kind of echoes a little bit around what both Michaela just said and with what Gustav just said. There's no data set too small. There's no reason why you shouldn't be considering Exasol in whatever the size or magnitude or complexity of the data is. The learning to that is just start with the basics. There is always a place to evolve. There is always somewhere where you can go. There is always somewhere that you can take it. But don't get sucked into the hype. There are a lot of sales machines and marketing machines out there that do a very good job of making a lot of noise and a lot of publicly available information I've always said that Exasol is the best kept secret in marketing in the BI world, and Ian, I know you and the marketing team at Exasol hate it when I say that, because you're trying your best to make sure that Exasol is out there and publicly visible. But the reality of it is, there's a certain degree of humility and understatedness that comes with the Exasol product, which I think is completely and utterly unfounded. I think there should be more publicly, or more people with megaphones standing on soapboxes on every street corner shouting about Exasol and just the value that you can turn it around with in business. And I think I've gone off on tangent there, Ian, and I don't think I actually answered your question. But I think I'm just so passionate about Exasol and what we've got out of it that I can't praise it highly enough.
No, that's good to know. It's good to know. And we're trying to shout louder and louder. That's part of this, bring this sort of authenticity to life a bit. So maybe, Michaela, over to you. Same sort of question. Mistakes that you might have made, or you might have avoided, or you might have got close to them and thought, what would you flag to somebody as to, don't worry about, don't waste your time?
Yeah. So from a development point of view, it would be having correct primary keys on your table. A lot of the times there are transactional databases that don't necessarily have a type of cursor that you can use to upsert your data. And in turn, you end up with either not having all the data or even having duplicate records. So having a very well-structured table is one of the main things that I've learned.
Right. Thank you. Gustav, finally, over to yourself.
I'll just regurgitate something I heard from the technical team over time. And as the concept of data warehouses matured a couple of years ago, a lot of mix and match was done with operational versus analytical data, and it was tried to be, one thing being all things. It's not. There's a real difference on how do you do operational reporting, where do you get the data, how do you bring it in, versus what do you do with analytical type reporting, the volumes, the granularity of those volumes, and maintaining it. One of the constraints, we've got another big retail customer where they want near real-time reporting from the warehouse. Now, it's almost like those words shouldn't be in the same sentence, but we're close. Within their scenario, I think, Michaela, is it 15 minutes? They're never more than 15 minutes behind. And this is 3,000 tills out there selling a bread, and that till transaction can be in the Exasol database, or will be, within 15 minutes. Now, I don't think real-time streaming data is one of Exasol's excelling features. It is not, but it's capable and it's able to do it. What it allowed us to do was to do operational reporting on transaction levels in the same ecosystem where the warehouse sits. It's different data structures and different schemas, but it's one ecosystem, one volume set of data. They pay for that volume set, and as Dom said, not per query, it's fixed. And if the data is used up, maybe we delete some old data or we buy more space, but that's what's available to them, and that works.
Yeah, excellent, good. Well, I'm just conscious we're sort of pretty much coming up to the top of the hour and the time up now. I mean, before we close this up, is anything the three of you would like to say that you haven't already said about this and your experiences?
Yeah, maybe we haven't said enough about Exasol and the support team. Us being in country, we fulfill the first line support. When Dom said those migrations we did, he was, I won't say he was guinea pig number one. We did a bunch of benchmarks beforehand when we went from 7 to 8. He was production customer first, and it took us a night, to get it done. It wasn't just Stephen and Michaela was on the team. It was some input from the Exasol support team. So really, really good support, dealing with people, not a call center somewhere with a mundane ticket number. It's personalized. And I think we may be privileged because we are the reseller. We might have access to the team, but it works well. The way that it's supported, the way that it's documented, it all works well.
Yeah, excellent. Good to hear.
Yeah, I can vouch for that 100%. And I think it sort of leads quite nicely into the point that I wanted to make. The people is really what I've come to appreciate quite a lot about Exasol over the last 2 years. Thanks largely to some time at the Exasol experience, which is hosted every year, and Ian, I know we've got to know each other a little bit through those sessions, but also some of the other technical folks that I've had conversations with. Everybody is so incredibly passionate about the product, about what they're doing, about what they're trying to achieve, about where it can go. And actually that resonates, and it's very apparent in what I've seen over the last couple of years, just in terms of the growth, in terms of what's being put out there into the market. Yes, Ian, there's a lot more megaphone on soapbox shouting going on, and yes, it's starting to happen more and more. But that's really because the people behind the scenes are they're a wonderful bunch of people, and you know, I've had the privilege of having many long conversations with some of the solution engineering team, Dirk in particular. They just want to get involved. They just want to find solutions. They want to find answers. And with a product like Exasol and the people like the Exasol team that support it, there's absolutely no reason why Exasol shouldn't be at the top of every analytics professional's mind right the way across the world. And yes, I sound like a little bit of a salesman here, and I promise you I'm not. There's absolutely no commission coming my way from Exasol at all, but it's just it's an incredible product that I really, really do think is so very valuable.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, appreciate the comments. That's good to hear. So we're pretty much out of time. I'm going to end it there. The only thing I would say is for everybody who's listening, one of the things that we are, as well as you've heard, passionate about trying to get programs working with Exasol. We're very passionate about trying to hear from you, to learn from you. So a number of different ways you can see on screen here. We've run out of time to take questions, but Robert has been collecting questions in the background, so we will follow this up with an email, or probably most likely post answers to the questions in our community forum as well. But you can see here a number of different ways of continuing learning about Exasol if perhaps you're not already a user. Stating the obvious, one of the most obvious ways to actually experiment and get hands-on with Exasol is download Exasol Personal, which is fully functional version of the product for individual users. You can follow the link there and download that. Available in a number of cloud solutions as well as a local version on macOS at the moment. So that's a great way of getting full access, free access, and get going and experimenting. A whole range of these sort of webinars that we've got, also a range of webinars on the website as well to learn from past topics. And you can actually learn about Digital Planet's story there as well, and a bit more detail behind what we've been talking about. So with that, I'm going to thank all three of you for your openness and your candidness. It was very insightful. Really appreciate it, as well as your time. And also to everybody listening, hopefully you got something out of this. If you have any questions, you want more information, please use the contacts via the website to get in touch with us, and we'll be happy to help. Thanks very much. Have a good day all. Take care.
Cheers. Thanks everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.